hate sales. I hate selling. I hate being sold to. I even hated Soupy Sales back in the day. Yeah, I'm old. So why would I choose to bring a person who spent his entire career in sales onto my show? Well, because like it or not, selling is a part of almost every job. And because Larry Levine has a different take on sales, one that shows up loud and clear in his book, Selling from the Heart, and one that we dive into during this episode of the DesuckifyWork Podcast. We talk about selling in a post-trust world and how the best way to get more comfortable with the outward part of selling is to turn inward and work on yourself. We explore how both sales and coaching have a lot of folks out there making our professions look pretty bad, and how we're both hoping to provide better examples. And we speak about the value of really getting to know the people you work with, the people you connect with, the people you may eventually sell to. This is how you can show up with real value when it counts. I think Larry provides a ton of value during our conversation. I hope you do too. Okay, Larry Levine, welcome to the DesuckifyWork Podcast.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I've been looking forward to this. We're gonna have a great time together.
I think you're right, and I'm
You're already laughing, dude. You're already laughing already, man.
I know. Oh, I'm just grateful that you're here, and I know we've talked a bit previously, and the whole idea of desuckifying is something that you're pretty on board with. So I appreciate that, and I think we're going to help some people desuckify a part of their work that they don't always love, which is the part of having to sell something. That's kind of your world, and I appreciate you bringing some of that wisdom to us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. But here's what's interesting. Let's just hit this head on, TJ. Mm-hmm. Everybody's in sales. Everybody is in sales, regardless if they believe it or not.
I agree.
Because, whether you're selling a product, a service, a solution, first and foremost, before any of that happens, you got to sell yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're all in sales.
I was thinking about that earlier today before we jumped on, and I was thinking, we sell ourselves, when we go get a job, when we show up at a job, it's like, how do we show people who we really are so that we can sort of do business with them in a way that works? And I think, it shows up, my world from advertising. We have to sell the work we create all the time. And I don't know that everybody thinks of it as sales, but I think a lot of people would be grateful if they could think, how can I do this in a way where it feels like it's coming from me, it's all me, but I'm effective, versus sort of trying to chase it all the time. So that's a big part of, I think, the world that a lot of folks who might be listening are coming from.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of my favorite sayings is to know thyself is to value thyself. And where I'm going with this is, in order to sell yourself, you really got to get to know yourself.
Yeah.
And so some people might be going, okay, where are you going with this? Mm-hmm. But how many people really take the time to understand what's inside as opposed to chasing what's always outside?
Yeah. That's well, you're speaking my language as a coach. I mean, that's the work I love to do with people, right? Is like dig in and explore yourself. And, it's something I've done a lot more since I've become a coach, honestly. And it's deeper work than you think. You think, I know myself pretty well. And then you get in there and you're like, I'm not sure why I do this or why I think this way. And is that really who I am? Or have I been, reciting a script for 20 years that was given to me by my, a boss all those years ago? It's hard. Yeah.
Well, I want to key in on a word that you use, and it was really. Mm-hmm. And that's what, if we could just emphasize that.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, do you know who you are? Do you really, right? With a capitalization, underline, exclamation, whatever else, boldface, italicize it.
Yeah.
Do you really know who you are? And I'm not saying that to cast a dark shadow over anyone or to disrespect them, by no means.
Yeah.
What was really interesting is I thought I knew who I was until the day I got riffed, career adjusted out of corporate America.
Yeah. You
And
want
it
to
was
talk
the
about that a
most,
little bit?
yeah, yeah, sure
Yeah.
is and I bring it up because sometimes it takes something like that for someone to inward reflect. And
Yep.
I had a good 30-year run in the office technology channel here in Southern California, in Los Angeles suburb where I live.
Mm-hmm.
What's really interesting is at 50, I found myself being career adjusted right out of corporate America,
Mm,
totally blindsided, had no idea it was coming.
mm,
And that was, I'll be 60 this year. So we're talking almost 10 years ago.
yeah.
And it was the most humbling experience I'd ever been through. And the only reason being is I was never fired before.
Yeah.
Even if I go back to my high school days, right?
Mm-hmm.
All the jobs that I had in high school and all the jobs I had in college, I was
Mm-hmm.
never career adjusted out. Now, here
Mm,
I find myself at 50 being
mm-hmm.
adjusted. And I remember I hit the valley amongst all valleys. And
Mm,
I cried for days and for weeks and months
mm-hmm.
going, who am I, right? I've never experienced this before. All of a sudden, my manhood's eroded.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I just remembered just talking to my wife and then talking to my close friends about what had happened.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's time for you to do something else, but before you do something else, find out what really makes your heart sing.
Yeah.
And that's where I've learned. I always tell people this, TJ.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
learned more in my 50s than in my 20s, 30s, and 40s combined.
Yeah.
And, I just thank the man upstairs because if I wasn't career adjusted, I don't know if I'd be in the position I'm in now. And I don't know if selling from the heart is selling from the heart.
Mm. Well, so how did you learn so much in your 50s? What started showing up for you and what did you do? What actions did you take to really dig deeper?
I think I'll use the coach word. I think
Yeah.
it was, I went back. So my first coach, TJ, was at 40.
Okay.
So I hired my first business coach at 40, only because at 40 I felt stuck.
Yeah.
I was sitting on the top. I was number one in my sales company,
Mm-hmm.
but I just felt I was stuck in this. And the simple reason is I have this, I guess I'm stricken with it that a lot of other people are stricken with the same disease called I'm never satisfied.
Yeah, I get
I'm
that.
just never satisfied.
Mm-hmm.
I can take down the largest deal I've ever taken down, celebrate for about 5 seconds, move on and go, okay, there's something else out there. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
It's just me. I've
Yeah.
learned how to stop at least for more than 30 seconds to celebrate a success.
Mm-hmm.
I just have this innate, just internal drive to keep my foot on the gas pedal.
Yeah.
It's what drives me. It what
Mm-hmm.
motivates me. And so
Mm-hmm.
when I was career adjusted at 50, I just went back to my 40s and my first business coach. And I said, okay, the way I'm going to plow out of this is to go back and learn some of the things I did at 40 that
Mm.
prepared me from 40 to 50.
Yeah.
So a lot of it was if I'm going to transform myself, because I learned through my coach how to transform myself in my 40s.
Mm-hmm.
Well, can I apply what I learned in my 40s? Can I apply it to my 50s?
Yeah.
And I did. I just went on this big inward journey and I
Mm-hmm.
unpacked what made me me. And what I mean by that is it goes back to the very beginning when you said, everybody's in sales.
Mm-hmm.
I went back to what made me successful in sales. What made me successful in sales was I had healthy, congruent, meaningful relationships based on trust. So
Mm-hmm.
all I did is I just said, hey, I got to get reacquainted with Larry Levine. I
Mm-hmm.
got to understand what makes Larry tick again.
Yeah.
And I just brought me to the forefront and I decided to work harder on myself than anyone would push me to.
Mm-hmm.
And I say this because um, maybe it's my addictive behavior as well, TJ, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm highly disciplined. I'm highly consistent. I
Mm-hmm.
hold myself radically accountable. I get up at the same time. I'm a highly routine oriented guy. I just went back to all of this and I
Mm-hmm.
just added a couple little twists to it.
Mm-hmm.
A little twist was just self reflection,
Mm-hmm.
journaling,
Okay.
coaches. more mentors, and really guarding what I call my inner circle.
Mm.
My
What's
inner circle, I kind of created, I call it a board of directors. I write about it a little bit in Selling from the Heart, but I
mm-hmm.
just an internal group of 5 to 6 people
Okay.
that I could open up to that were from various backgrounds. They're all still near and dear to me. They're all still in my inner circle.
Mm-hmm.
You happen to know one of them because one of them is Daryl Amy that you know.
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
And the other ones are just near and dear friends of mine here in the city that I live in.
Mm-hmm.
And I just opened up and I'm a big believer that if you want to transform yourself, you got to be open for feedback.
Mm.
And I'm a big
It's
believer
tough.
the breakfast of champions. And
Yeah.
it's tough, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think.
But you got to be willing to take it. And
Mm-hmm.
I said, still to this day at 59 years old, I look every single day inward and I spend
Mm.
hours looking inward, but then
Yeah.
I'm always asking for help. I'm always looking at how can I be better? What do I need to tweak?
Mm-hmm.
Whether that be positive or negative. You get what I'm saying?
I do, and I think there's a couple things in there that I think a lot of folks might resonate with. I think the general sort of inward journey, I think, is one that we either feel we don't have time for. We're just like moving forward so fast with work and all of our other responsibilities, and it's like, well, who has time to look inward? I just got to trust that I know myself, and it sometimes takes those events, getting knocked out of a job or something significant, where you go, wait a second. First off, you're questioning, who am I? Your job gets taken away. We attach ourselves in terms of our identity to the job a lot of times. So who am I? And then it's, who am I really? And then you kind of walk back and said, okay, there's a lot of stuff that was there for me that I need to reconnect with. And then there's a few things I can just add on top now that I'm a little older and a little wiser. I think all of that really connects. I think the feedback thing is really interesting because, man, that's a big part of the world I come from. In advertising, you're creating stuff out of nothing and showing it to people and asking them, what do you think, every day? And it is one of the hardest things to sort of accept with grace and to not have it chip away at your identity, right? How you're trying to build yourself up, and then somebody says, I don't like that thing you just made. So what lessons have you learned about how to hear, accept, and then, maybe act on feedback that's helped you kind of avoid the moments of like, uh-oh, am I not good enough?
Yeah, there's so much to unpack right there. And I
Mm-hmm.
will tell you this, and I'll throw hand on heart and tell you,
Yeah.
I work on it on a daily basis
Mm-hmm.
because it goes back to working harder on myself than anybody. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I will suffer from imposter syndrome and comparison syndrome, things that I think everybody, if they're open and honest,
Yeah.
suffered from time or two.
Yeah.
Um, there's something that's in. I'm a big believer in this. Nothing happens unless y'all take action.
Mm.
You can get all the feedback in the world. You could read all the books in the world. You can listen to all the coaches in the world, all the mentors, and
Mm-hmm.
you soak it all in.
Yeah.
But if you fail to take action, the only person you're fooling is yourself.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah. So everybody that I ask for feedback on, any book that I read, and I'm an avid book reader, any
Mm-hmm.
podcast I listen to, any
Mm-hmm.
mentor that comes into my life, the coaches that I've paid to come into my life,
Mm-hmm.
I take everything they have to say, read, listen to, and I go, if there's one or two things I can internally take from this, I'm going to immediately apply this and take action on it. In fact, massive action on it. It just
Mm-hmm.
goes back to, I hold myself radically accountable to me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to let myself down.
Yeah. It's interesting, right? Because I think everybody, if you ask them the question, they'd say, yeah, I don't want to let myself down either. And yet sometimes we do, right? We maybe stray from, the things that work for us, the things that we actually believe in. Maybe we lose a little bit of that accountability. And there's a number of reasons why that happens. But I love the idea that taking action, I think the action is what sort of builds up the muscles. You say you soak in information, and that's good, but the action is what kind of imprints it on your brain. It creates some of those habits. And you use this term massive action. So it got me curious. What would be the difference between an action and a massive action?
One word.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna just hit it head on. It's consistency.
Okay.
And the simple reason is I believe people can take action.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has the capability of taking action.
Mm-hmm.
But are they consistently consistent with the action?
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you a case in point. I remember I was out of town with a client, and my wife had went over to our dear friend's house
Mm-hmm.
for dinner. And when I had come home from my trip, she said, "Hey, Larry, we were talking about you." And I go, right. I go, I'm sure y'all were because I wasn't in the room. It was easy for y'all to talk about me.
Yeah.
But she said that your friend, who's my near and dear closest guy friend,
Mm-hmm.
Larry's the most disciplined, consistent guy I know.
Mm.
And it put a big smile on my wife's face, and she had to
Yeah.
tell me.
Yeah.
And so we talked about it. But the reason why I share that little brief, synopsis for Reader's Digest version of the story
Mm-hmm.
is I work on it. I
Mm-hmm.
work on it every single day.
Yeah.
This takes practice.
Mm-hmm.
Taking action takes practice. It's
Mm-hmm.
not just something you're going to wake up in the morning and say, man, you know what? I'm going to be radically consistent. I'm going to hold myself to massive amounts of action.
Mm-hmm.
But yet you can't go more than 1 or 2 days of doing something consistently.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying this in a bad way, TJ.
Yeah.
It's that you got to draw a line in the sand somewhere
Mm-hmm.
and say, if I was more consistent, if I held myself with the utmost of integrity, if I was congruent in the way I led my life,
Mm-hmm.
what would start to happen?
Yeah.
And that's just me. That's my internal driver.
Mm-hmm.
It drives me in my personal life. It drives me in my professional life.
Yeah. No, I hear that. And I think it reminds me of a term that shows up sometimes, which is self-leadership, right? It's, talk a lot about leadership on this show. It's, part of what I do as a coach is work with leaders. But I think the most interesting part of all that is the self-leadership, right? How do we treat ourselves in terms of the respect that we give ourselves that we would probably give other people, meaning, we want the best for other people and we're willing to provide the kind of feedback and the kind of support that leads to that. And then sometimes for ourselves, we don't do that, right? We fail to kind of value our own growth the way we might value someone else's growth. And I'm not sure where that comes from, but I think what you're saying is you can't think your way out of that. You have to act your way out of that.
Yeah, it's so true because the only person, the person we lie to the most
Mm-hmm.
is ourselves.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, hands down, 100%.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The person we lie to the most is ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So if we lie to ourselves and we say, hey, we're going to do this, I'm going to lead myself, I'm going to lead myself. If you fail to do that,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to ask you, do you think you'll be able to lead others? If you can't lead yourself, I'm a massive believer, you're going to struggle to lead others. It's going to become massively apparent.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think for some reason that's a blind spot that a lot of us have. We're so outward focused sometimes that it's like you don't take that beat to look inward. And I think that's a great theme that we're tapping into here. And I'm curious. You got your book and I can see it there, over your shoulder, Selling from the Heart. And I know that's like the basis of all the work you do with executives and others, sales folks. I imagine a lot of this idea of looking inward first and then going outward is baked into that idea. And I think the other thing that shows up is, the word heart obviously jumps out because I think a lot of folks, when they think of selling, especially those of us who are like, I don't know if I love the idea of selling. It feels like we have to put our heart over here when we sell because we have to sort of become this salesperson as opposed to staying ourselves. So how can looking inward and then applying what you learn into action as a salesperson, and like we've said, we're all salespeople at some point. How does that show up, and how do you help people get there?
Good stuff, TJ. Is I'd say this, I want to hit and touch on the subtitle of my book,
Okay.
and how your authentic self sells you.
Yeah.
And let's just put this off to the side, how your authentic self sells you, just for a moment.
Okay.
Hit on something that you also said. And I think the reason why some people, I'm not going to say all people, but let's just say a vast majority of people have this phobia when it comes to sales.
Yeah.
I think it's the preconceived notion of what they think sales is based
Mm-hmm.
on movies, based on things they read, based on a past experience that they've had. I'm just a huge believer, and my beliefs on this: perception is reality.
Yeah.
And the way people perceive salespeople is their reality. So then when they just have this phobia, man, I can't sell because now all of a sudden I have to start doing these things or acting in a certain way that's incongruent with my core beliefs.
Yep.
And so there's three things that this just really plays on. It plays on your confidence, it plays on your believability, and it plays on your self-worth. Stronger you are on the inside, the more confident you are on the inside, the more that you believe in yourself and your messaging, and the higher your self-worth, I believe the better you will become in how you connect and relate to people.
Yeah.
But you gotta be willing to say, you know what, this is who I am. This is what I firmly believe in. This is what I stand for. And it's so interesting because in this world that we live in today, TJ, seems like people would rather accept somebody who's inauthentic than to accept somebody who is authentic. Stop and think about that for a moment.
Yeah. I mean,
marinate on that one.
Yeah, I'm trying to picture a good example of that. I mean, my first thing that comes to mind is the world of influencers and all that stuff, and like all the folks on Instagram and TikTok who are maybe putting on a front rather than showing up for themselves. Is there anything that shows up for you when you say that term, that inauthenticity?
Oh man, you're gonna wind me up like like none other on this one.
Yeah.
It's so interesting when I start hearing about, social media and influencers and all that is, I mean, you can do whatever you want. I mean, right. I mean,
Yeah.
people portray themselves however they want to portray themselves on social media platform.
Yeah.
But sooner or later, the has no clothes.
Yeah.
And,
Absolutely.
And when you lead an incongruent lifestyle, sooner or later, people start figuring you out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember having this deep discussion with my business coach around authenticity. And we'd go back and forth on, what are words that you can use? And by the way, let me preface this. I have no PhD in human behavior or psychology or anything like that. I always say, what I bring to the table with selling from the heart and all this is through a practitioner's eyes, based on 30 years of getting the what kicked out of me selling a highly commoditized product as copies in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
and so the reason why I say is, and we have these big, deep discussions around authenticity between me and my coach, and we just drilled it down to one word, and that one word's congruency. And congruency can play out face to face. It can play out in social media. It could play out in your emails. It could play out in your phone calls. It play out in your text messaging.
Yeah.
And the reason why I bring this up is, if you want to get people to really connect and relate to you at a heart level, the walk's got to match the talk, TJ.
Yeah.
And social media is just a cesspool. Right? It's a playground for people to act in ways they probably would normally not act.
Yeah. Yeah. It incentivizes it, I think, right? And I think, human nature is one to sort of copy what we see from others. So if enough people get successful and successful, I mean just getting a lot of followers or whatever, a lot of attention by not being congruent, by not being real or authentic, then that then incentivizes others to say that's, I guess, how I should be. And it's really interesting because I think about my own experience on social media, and I've always been very turned off by that, and I've always, I think, tried to show up, as myself, whichever platform I'm on, which includes LinkedIn, which is one where I think a lot of people struggle because they go, I have to look quote unquote professional and all that. And it's like, well, professional is however you define that and however you live that, and better to show people how you actually live it, and what that means for you, rather than trying to, put a mask on or, be somebody else. And I think another thing I see on social media is, people, and this is like, I think about there's a comparison here maybe between some of the perceptions in the world of sales and in the world of coaching, because the way you're talking about sales, I'm like, well, that sounds wonderful. That I can totally get that, and I can totally live that. And then there's the way I think of coaching and the way I do it and the way others that I've worked with do it. And I'm like, that's great. But yet you see people on social media, both in the world of sales and coaching, who are just spinning stories every day and just trying to like puff themselves up, basically. And that's what I think can turn people off to both of those professions, because suddenly they think, oh God, I don't want to deal with a salesperson. And if a coach is going to be just some blowhard who's just sitting there like saying, I'm amazing and I'm going to have you make $1 million in a week, like, come on. So how can people resist this sort of human drive towards, chasing the thing that seems like the big thing versus chasing what's in here and chasing what's the real thing? How do you coach people through that if they're maybe struggling with that?
Yeah, wow. So maybe I'm going to unpack it in a couple different ways.
Cool.
But I think if you and I were having this conversation in my 20s,
yeah,
I'd give you a totally different answer than now that I'm well into my 50s.
Yeah, I get that.
And I think it all goes back to what's your significance, right? What do you attach your significance to? So in my early years, I would attach my significance to making money.
Yeah.
I was young. I had a young family, right? Got married young, kids young, things like that. So of course, my whole viewpoint on money back then was totally different than it is now. So when I would interact with people and so forth, it would all be around, I was thinking about dollar signs, right? And selling from the heart, right? I was oozing freaking commission breath early on in my career.
Yeah.
I learned later on in life, and it was only through, my coach that I started to unpack, what do I attach my significance to? And once I really understood what I attached my significance to, started to change how I connected and related to people. So just hear me out on this. If you're a salesperson or if you're a coach and you're attaching your significance to money,
yeah,
do you think it comes out in your demeanor? Do you think it comes out in how you interact with people? Do you think it comes out in your body language and in your email messaging and so forth? You may or may not think it,
right,
but it does.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I just learned, later on in life that I don't attach my significance to money any longer. Yeah, I mean, obviously you got to have money to pay bills and right, to plan for retirement and to plan for other things, to give back. And so,
yeah.
But when I attached my significance to making a difference, it opened up a whole nother world of how I connect and relate to people. It goes back to, and I learned this from a near and dear friend of mine. His name's Scott Schilling.
Okay.
And I learned this in a conversation I had with Scott. This was years and years ago. Hear me out on this because it totally plays out.
Yeah.
Totally plays out in what we're talking about.
Cool.
He says many salespeople. So I'll make this sales centric, but it could be attached. Right? We're all selling something. So this will play out. Scott goes on to say this. Most salespeople will walk into conversations with high intention,
Mm-hmm.
high attachment.
Mm. Yeah.
What would it be like if we walked into every conversation with high intention, low attachment?
Mm. Yeah. That's hard though, right? I mean,
See,
like,
TJ, it's massively hard.
yeah,
But, right? I
yeah,
hate to throw the but word in this, but there has to be a but to
of
this.
course. Yeah.
It, in Selling from the Heart, I write about if you want to have an ever flowing sales funnel, you have to build an ever flowing relationship funnel.
Yeah.
Now,
Mm-hmm.
this is going to play out. This can play out in the advertising world. This can play out in the marketing world. This can play
Mm-hmm.
out in the coaching world. This plays
Yeah.
out in the sales world.
Yeah.
Check this out. If you're not building trust-based relationships, if you're not adding to your relationship funnel,
Mm-hmm.
mark my word on this, your sales funnel is going to suffer.
Yeah.
So if you're a coach,
Mm-hmm.
and by the way, if you're a coach, y'all got to prospect for clients.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah,
in
we do.
marketing, y'all got to prospect for more marketing clients. If you're
Yeah.
in advertising, y'all got to prospect for more advertising clients.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's just face it, it's just the way of the world.
Yep.
So if you want to succeed in sales, it's as simple as every single day, you must hold yourself accountable to connecting, to engaging in conversations, to
Mm-hmm.
building relationships, and so forth. I will prove this out. And all I'm going to use is TJ Bennett on this one.
Okay.
So I'm a coach.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just say I'm in the coaching world.
Right.
And I meet TJ Bennett for the very first time
Mm-hmm.
through an acquaintance, because that's TJ. That's how you and I met. You and I
Yeah.
met Dan Dominguez, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, okay, I'm going to pull Dan Dominguez into this for a second, right? So
Cool.
Dan Dominguez sends me an email, CCs you into it,
Mm-hmm.
and says, right, TJ meet Larry, Larry meet TJ. That's not how the
Yeah.
email, that's the gist
But
of the
that's the gist. Yeah.
that's the gist of the email. So then TJ, you and I connected.
Mm-hmm.
Now, hear me out on this. At that point, yeah, I mean, I came through a trusted source. So I walked into this conversation already with probably some level of trust
Yeah.
because it came from Dan Dominguez.
Of
But
course.
set that aside, it could be anybody introducing you, right?
Mm-hmm.
It could just be at some networking event. Hey, Dan, right? Dan,
Right.
hey, meet TJ. Just had a great conversation with him. At
Yep.
that point, you may not know me, like me, nor trust me,
Mm-hmm. Right.
but it's my opportunity to earn your trust.
Mm-hmm.
That means if we look at this as a relationship funnel and a sales funnel, just follow along with me on this.
Mm-hmm.
TJ, just because I connected to TJ doesn't mean he's going to do business with me.
Right.
So I set that in the top of a relationship funnel.
Mm-hmm.
I just met TJ.
Yep.
Dan introduces me to TJ. I set up a call with TJ.
Mm-hmm.
Start the innermost, of a friendship. That's
Mm-hmm.
it for right
Yep.
now.
Mm-hmm.
As I get to know TJ and he gets to know me and how we make each other tick, well, eventually that's going to move through a relationship funnel. And if there's an opportunity
Mm-hmm.
for an advancement past that, well, then it goes to a sales funnel. You follow where I'm going with this, TJ?
I do. And I think
And I think
what,
that's where people miss the boat
yeah.
is inconsistency in sales, regardless if you're coaching, advertising, marketing, solo entrepreneur, is
Mm-hmm.
on a daily basis, you're not connecting with nor having enough conversations with people on a daily basis to
Yep.
fill up any kind of a relationship funnel that flows right into a sales funnel.
Yeah. It's interesting because as you said that, I think what happens too often for folks who don't kind of see that bigger picture is you press fast forward, and try to move people from that relationship funnel into the sales funnel almost immediately. It's like, okay, I know you now, and you skip the sort of like and trust part, and you just go, well, I know you, so you might be open to this over here versus what you're saying, at least as I hear it, you got to get through the know, the like, and the trust. And you can't, there's no secret there. It's just showing up authentically, listening to that other person, being a good conversation partner when you show up. And as you move through all of that, knowing can turn to liking, and it may not. And that's okay too. If it doesn't turn to liking, then you just met somebody interesting and you move on. But then from liking, the more you connect, the more you interact, the more you show up with integrity, trust starts to develop. And then what I hear is you're going to be listening differently as you've built that relationship. Because, one of the things I know you talk about is, you're wanting to add value. That's a big driver for you. And that's a big driver for anyone who has to sell things, is to think in terms of where can I add value? So if you really start to know somebody and you like and trust each other, you can listen with the intent to add value. And that may show up as adding value just as a friend. I'm going to go pick you up from the airport or whatever. But it might show up as like, oh, sounds like you or maybe someone might benefit from some coaching or might benefit from some sales training. Do you want to talk about that? So am I getting that right in terms of what this could look like if you're sort of living it as authentically as possible?
Yeah, and I want to expand on something that you said, because I think it's mission critical in the order that these things go in.
Yeah.
And I go back to a guest we had on the Selling from the Heart podcast. And the guest that we had on this podcast, he's a professor at the Kellogg School of Business.
Okay.
And he talks a lot about trust. I want to plan this for, because I'm going to use this example. I'm going to share something else. It all plays out in the coaching realm as well, marketing, advertising, whatever arena y'all play in. What our guest on the podcast said is, in the first conversation, the first encounter you have with somebody, you have 3 minutes to build trust with that person. Trust is established within the first 3 minutes. And it's not to say that if you do not establish trust in the first 3 minutes, game over.
Okay.
It's not over. You're constantly swimming for trust.
Yeah.
So what I'd like for people to think about in their encounters with people is, how fast can I establish a baseline of trust? And where I think about this is, I just finished reading a really phenomenal book by Dr. Henry Cloud.
Okay.
The book's actually titled Trust. And there's a big lengthy subtitle around it. The guy's a phenomenal individual. I've grown fond of him. Now I'm jonesing for him to try to come on the Selling from the Heart podcast.
Of course.
Nevertheless. But in Trust, he talks about there's 5 essentials in building trust.
Okay.
Now, I'm not going to go through all 5, but I want to hit on the very first essential, because it plays out in our conversation that we're having. And Dr. Henry Cloud, the first essential is understanding. So if I peel this back, it's as simple as this. Do you know me? Do you understand me? Are you listening to me? Do you see me?
Yeah.
How are you going to make me feel?
Yeah.
And I tell you, TJ, this plays out in establishing any kind of levels of trust.
Yeah.
Whether you're a coach, a solo entrepreneur in marketing and all that. And I think we fail to see that, because if we place the focus on us, and we attach our significance to money, and every encounter that we get with somebody, we get into this transactional based type conversation. It just oozes out of people. Can I give you a real world example?
Please. Yeah.
So just recently I connected with somebody on LinkedIn.
Okay.
And I'm just gonna call it a person, right? So I don't get into this male, female. I just connected to a person. And this person and we'd engaged in some conversation, since we connected on LinkedIn. That conversation was just purely online type conversation. Me, communicating on this person's content, vice versa. Well, this person drops me a message in LinkedIn. Says, hey, it's about time that you and I connect and engage in a conversation.
Okay.
Okay, fair enough, right?
Yeah.
I said, yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah.
We schedule some time together.
Mm-hmm.
And within 5 minutes, the spin doctor started to happen. If you
Okay.
know where I'm going, TJ,
I do.
is the whole, I walked into this with the open mind and saying, you know what, I've never spoken to this person before outside of
Mhm.
online conversation on content. I
Yep.
just want to use this time to get acquainted. What's this person's backstory? What makes this
Sure.
person TJ no different than when you and I first connected?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Exactly.
Within 5 minutes, the spin doctor happens. And then
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden, I'm like going, what was this person's ulterior motive?
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
the reason why I'm saying this is now this person's relentless every single day, popping me messages in LinkedIn, where now
Mm-hmm.
I have to just say enough's enough.
Yeah.
But there's a point behind that story.
Mm-hmm.
There's no relationship.
No.
That went right from connection to, can I put this person into a sales funnel?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's what I
That,
want everyone to think about
yeah.
is this is why trust and establishing trust is so mission critical. The reason being, I know you're why coach,
Yep.
right? And
Yeah.
we deep relationship because, right? One of
Mm-hmm.
our, the selling from the heart team is why certified as well.
Yep.
And I'm a big trust guy. My what is trust.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. No,
So that's why I look at things through a completely different lens.
yeah. Well, I think, what's interesting about that one is like, even if trust isn't in your why, how, or what, we've all got a trust meter inside of us,
100%.
and it will flare to the don't trust when somebody tries to hit that fast forward button and go immediately from I met you, I connected with you to I got stuff you should have. And so I think trusting yourself that you'll get to a place if you're being yourself and being authentic and being, you talked about the word listening. I think that's so important. I think, we get so in our heads and then we're not listening to what the person's telling us because we're worried about getting to that sale. Or another word that shows up for me as you were talking is curiosity. Who are you? Like you
Yeah.
said, what makes you tick? What is your backstory? What is your purpose? You talked about, what do you attach significance to? I mean, that's just such an interesting way of phrasing that to, and it's like, for you, it's making a difference. Like, okay, now I'm starting to know you. I'm not probably going to sell you yet, but at least like now I start to know, okay, that matters to Larry. And then that's an opportunity to share and go, I get that, for me, it's more, coming back to the why. I'm a make sense person. So I'm a make sense why. So for me, solving problems is like, fuel for me. So if you give me an opportunity to solve a problem, I'm probably going to do it.
Yeah.
So, and then you hear that. And then at some point you go, got somebody who's got a pretty sticky problem. He might need a coach. I wonder if TJ would be that. Like, so you start to see the opportunities where value can show up. And I think for so many people, particularly those who haven't been immersed in the world of sales and maybe gotten training that tells them how to do this appropriately, we're so focused on how does this lead to some good end result that we just, not only do we try to fast forward, but we're not listening.
Yeah, 100%.
We're all up in here.
100%.
Yeah.
And this is why this whole concept of
Mm-hmm.
funnels fueling sales funnels
Mm-hmm.
is so important. If people can just ingrain this in their head and
Yeah.
it goes back to doing consistent things on a consistent basis,
Yeah.
is I just learned a long time ago
Mm-hmm.
that no one forced me into sales.
Yeah.
I chose sales.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like when I was 10 years old, I said, hey, when I want to grow up, Larry Levine's going to be a salesperson. It didn't work out that way. Just like it doesn't work out that way for most people who kind of just fall into it.
Yep.
But what I did soon learn is because my first year in sales was just horrible,
Mm-hmm.
horrible experience, horrible manager, horrible everything.
Yeah.
I just learned if I was going to survive in this, I had to do things differently.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I learned in my early 20s, just based on how I was raised. I
Mm-hmm.
was raised with a highly relational mother and a
Mm-hmm.
rocket scientist for a father, literally liquid jet propulsion, very
Wow.
smart guy,
Mm-hmm.
probably one of the smartest people I know still to this day.
Mm-hmm.
What I did is I smashed those together
Mm-hmm.
and I brought that to sales. I
Yeah.
brought my relationship to sales, but I brought a plan, a practice, a
Mm-hmm.
process
Yeah.
based on how I was raised and how I was held accountable to things.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, you know what? My sales manager is not holding me accountable to it. I'm going to hold myself accountable to it. And that's when I learned that the more relationships I build, the more conversations I open on a
Mm-hmm.
daily basis, the more things will start to happen.
Yeah.
It's not rocket science stuff. It's
Right.
foundational stuff. It's basic stuff. It's boring stuff to most.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this is
Not
the
not
stuff
boring to
that
me, but I get it. Yeah.
yeah,
It sounds so foundational and so fundamental that we often think we don't need to focus on it. We just
but
kind of
yeah,
think we'll
of
figure it
course.
out instead of
Yeah.
like making it a practice, you know?
And it's literally no different. So if I fast forward, right? If I fast forward to, the Selling from the Heart podcast has been around almost 7 years, TJ.
Nice.
The book's been out 5. And,
Mm-hmm.
I got a surprise because later this summer, book 2's coming out.
Awesome.
And the way we built Selling from the Heart was the exact same way I built it from the copier world.
Mm. Hmm.
It All right. And this thing was started from scratch,
Yeah.
TJ. Not a
Mm-hmm.
single client. Nobody knew who Selling from the Heart was. One
Right.
day I got Daryl Amy to start a podcast. And
Mm-hmm.
thus 7 years later, we have a very strong podcast with a very engaged and loyal community. I got a
Yep.
book that is sold beyond my wildest dreams.
Mm-hmm.
It's turned into a business that's fueled a movement.
Yep.
And I'm only saying this because every single day I do the things that I've been sharing with you during our time together, which I'm super grateful for.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't build relationships, if I don't build connection, if I don't build an engaged audience and a community,
Mm-hmm.
none of this happens.
Yeah.
I have no opportunity to sell.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
what I like people to take from this, whether you're a solo entrepreneur, a coach, you're in marketing, you're in advertising. You
Mm-hmm.
you got to be
Yeah.
willing to double down on yourself and do certain things every single day.
Yeah.
Control what you can control. And
Mm-hmm.
that's how you show up and the things you do to move the needle, but it requires you taking action.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this phrase shows up once in a while, but I always like it. It's simple, but it's not easy. Meaning, you know what you need to do, but then you have to do it, and it's very easy to get distracted and pulled away from being consistent with some of the actions we take. And I know that I can be guilty of this for sure, where certain habits get built up, and then it's just they go away, and it's like I think if you can connect it back to the value that it provides to yourself, right? I think sometimes maybe we lose sight. It becomes like such just a daily thing that we're not remembering why it's so important to who we are and how we show up, that it becomes easier to ditch. And you talked about journaling before a little bit. And I thought, whether you journal or whether it's just taking 2 minutes at the end of the day to kind of think through things, reminding yourself of why those actions are in place, because they can become background noise. It's just part of my day. I do this thing, I do this thing, I do this thing. But just giving yourself clarity on, I do these things because it allows me to be this kind of a person.
Yep.
That can be easy to lose sight of if you don't make a practice of it. So, I think one more consistent thing we can do is just find a way to reflect every day on what you did, how you showed up, who you were being when you showed up, and how do you feel about that? And is there anything you need to adjust? And are the actions you took that day in line with who you want to be? Again, really simple, but if you don't do it, then you lose sight of it, and it starts to get kind of challenging for people.
It's interesting, and this is just ingrained in my belief system.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do these little things.
Yeah.
With any consistency and with any discipline, you're never going to be able to do the big things, the hard things with any level of discipline or consistency. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why people chase shiny objects. That's why they look for the silver bullet, the quick fix, the hack, right?
Yeah.
You can make $50,000 in 7 days if you follow these 10 steps.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think
If you can't do the little things with any level of consistency and discipline,
mm-hmm.
mark my word, you will struggle. You will struggle to do the bigger things. The
Yeah.
small things are the foundational things. The little things are the foundational things. That
Mm-hmm.
the any to me, this is I'll share a quick funny story, but
Sure.
this was ingrained in me. I'm happily married 32 years.
Mm-hmm.
And before my wife and I were getting married, we were dating at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And we're sitting around the dinner table. And it was my wife and I. Well, she wasn't my wife at the time, but y'all get where I'm going with
Yep.
it. And it was
Mm-hmm.
her parents. Now her father's deceased now. And we're sitting around the dinner table, and now my mother-in-law, back then she wasn't, she knew the marriage question was going to get popped here pretty quick. I mean,
Yeah.
she just sensed it. So we're sitting around the dinner table, and my mother-in-law is from Mississippi,
Okay.
and she's got a twang. I love her dearly. She's not the smartest whip out there, but I love her dearly.
Okay.
And I can't do a Mississippi accent
Yeah.
because I do it. I wouldn't even attempt to do it.
Fair
Can't do
enough.
an accent. And she said, right, still to this day, she calls me boy, B-O-Y.
Okay.
Boy, right?
Yeah.
And she goes, I sense that sooner or later, you and Robin are going to get married. Robin's my wife's name.
Yep.
She goes, I want to pass on some family knowledge that was passed on to me that I passed on to my son, my daughter, and now I'm passing it on to you because I sense you're going to ask Robin to marry you.
Mm-hmm.
You best take care of her.
Yeah.
And in a Southern Mississippi accent, I'm not going to do it. She said, listen, if you can't do the little things correctly,
Mm-hmm.
you'll never be able to do the big things correctly.
Mm.
All I ask you to do is do not ever half-ass anything that you do.
Mm.
That ingrained, that simple thing now,
Yeah.
34 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
has been ingrained and etched in my
Yeah.
brain.
Yeah.
That I do the little things with consistency and discipline.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't fast what I do.
Yeah. Hmm.
Imagine if we just carried that with us.
Yeah.
That changed the course of what we do.
Yeah. I love that. I love that line. And I think, it reminds me of the quote, like, how you do anything is how you do everything. I think it's kind of in line with that. But I think it really just comes back to what you started with, which is just, focus on yourself, pay attention to yourself, how you show up in the world, do some of that inner work. Some of that inner work starts with just what are you doing each day to show up as the person that you say you want to be, and how can you close that gap? Because I think there's always there's this gap of like who we say we want to be and how we show up, and I think we can close it, and then that never satisfied part of us kind of keeps moving the goalposts a little bit, but at some point you can keep saying who you want to be is this, and you can keep not being that person, and then you're going to make a choice. Either stop saying that you want to be that person and just be the person who you are and be okay with that, or do those little things consistently so that you then are at least approaching the person who you want to be. And that's, again, I think it's simple, it's easy, like simple advice, but the day-to-day is where it gets lost, right? That's the thing. And I think that's the hard part of anything. And coming back to sales, if you're not consistently working on your relationships, if you're not consistently, listening, being curious, following up with people who are making an effort to connect with you, responding with kindness and grace and interest in what's going on for them. If you're not doing those things, then you're never going to get good at selling or any other practice that you're trying to get good at.
Yeah, without intentionality, this just becomes a hobby.
Yeah. Yeah. I get that. Yeah. Well, Larry, I want to maybe start winding us down here because I think we've given everybody like a lot to chew on. And I think some of the themes are super consistent, right? I think it's start by doing the inner work, looking into yourself, figuring out what you attach significance to in your life, what really matters to you. I actually think the why assessment is a really helpful tool in that regard because it can really clarify that. I mean, as soon as I learned that I was a make sense, it was like, oh my God, of course. I mean, it made sense. I'm like, this is why I'm constantly chasing solving problems. And that can be really good. And sometimes that can send me down rabbit holes because I'm solving problems I don't need to solve. But it's really good to know that because then how do you go apply that into what you do? And then how do you create the actions in your life that allow you to live according to the thing you attach most significance to? So I love that. I love the idea of the little actions lead you to the big actions. I love the idea of congruency, being true to who you are, showing up as who you are. And I love the simplicity of when you're in a sales situation or when you're thinking about the fact that you're going to have to sell something, whether it's yourself, the work you do in advertising, you're trying to get a new client for a marketing agency or as a coach or whatever. The idea that it starts with relationship building and really being genuine about that, building trust through those relationships and then figuring out where you can add value. That becomes a really straightforward way of thinking about the world that allows a lot of people, I think, to show up and do a good job of selling without feeling like they have to become that slimy used car vibe person that they maybe think they have to become. So I really appreciate you driving that home and articulating it with stories, your own personal stories too, to really help us connect to that. And it brings me to a question I ask a lot of folks. You come from the world of sales, but you also, a lot of people, both inside and outside of the sales world. And so you're probably getting a pretty good view of how people are feeling about work and what maybe could be done for people to feel better about work and desuckify it a bit. So if you could wave a magic wand and desuckify work for everyone, what does that look like?
I think, great question, but I think it goes back to, I'm just going to pull this in. I'm going to pull Dr. Henry Cloud back into this.
Okay, cool.
And just use the first essential of trust.
Mm-hmm.
And it's understanding.
Yeah.
And just imagine a culture inside of a company where from the top down, they brought understanding to the forefront so that employees, right?
Yeah.
That employee TJ goes, man, Larry really gets me. Right? Yeah. Larry really understands me. He knows where I'm coming from. He sees me. He knows me. He values me. He's been listening to me. And the reason why I say this, TJ, is just to imagine for a moment, let's all put our thinking caps on. How many leaders out there really, and I mean really, know their people?
Yeah.
Now, this is where I'm going to go. Some of y'all are probably going to go, I don't have time for any of this, right? This is a bunch of just whack jobby stuff. Yeah. You find time for what you find time for.
Yeah.
And what concerns me, and the reason why I find the word desuckify fascinating.
Yeah.
What would it be like if you actually knew your people?
Yeah.
If you knew them on a personal level and at a professional level and what makes them tick. I'll share one quick thing, and as you wrap this up.
Yeah.
I remember sitting, this is about a year and a half or so ago. I was in a small group of leaders with some of their people.
Yep.
And we went around the room and they had to share something personally and professionally about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I just watched the leaders in the room when it got to their people.
Yeah.
TJ, if I heard this, I heard it a million times. I didn't know that about you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I didn't know that. How long you been doing that?
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm not shocked, but it's a little sad. And I think there's a few things that maybe show up there as why that happens. I think one is too damn busy, like you said. I don't have time for that. I think another is, maybe we're not listening. Maybe people are saying these things or at least opening the door to that conversation and we're not hearing it and we're moving past it. Another thing, and this is a tricky thing, but I think in corporate culture, you sometimes are walking a fine line of not wanting to feel like I'm being invasive into somebody's personal life. I'm invading their privacy, so to speak.
But you know what? I'm going to push back on that.
Okay.
Totally push back on that thought process.
Mm-hmm.
I can get to know TJ on a personal level and still have boundaries around it.
No, I agree with that, but I think it sets off a flare for people,
Again, but you got to be willing to go down that road.
I agree.
Then I'm going to ask for you maybe to go talk to somebody about it.
Yeah.
But Peter, if you want to desuckify, if you're going to, because you asked,
Yeah.
you're going to use that phrase is, I'm going to go back to just saying simple, start understanding your people,
Mm-hmm.
understand what makes them tick.
Yeah. No, I'm fully on board with it. I'd like to think I'm pretty good at that when I've had opportunities to lead people. I know I could be better at it at times, but I think curiosity goes a long way.
100%. It just I gotta share one more. Sorry,
Okay. That's all right.
We're in the process of remodeling our kitchen, our family room. It's been quite a freaking process.
Yeah. Yeah.
Woo, Lordy, has it been a process?
I get it.
But it just goes back to where I'm pushing leaders on this simple reason is I had an inspector come over from the city I live in. I had an inspector come over to my house recently.
Mm-hmm.
I had to inspect rough plumbing, rough electrical before they could do anything else.
Yep.
And in the span of 10 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
I found out this guy used to be a general contractor, is retired.
Mm-hmm.
Loves Pink Floyd, loves that kind of music.
Okay.
Plays guitar in his church band. His church happens to be right down the street
Mm-hmm.
from my house.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Those were three things I found out about that person in the span of 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
I met my Elks Lodge the other night
Mm-hmm.
and to another city inspector
Mm-hmm.
who knows the
guy. Okay.
He said, hey, right, so-and-so came over to my house. He goes, yeah, what'd you think about this guy? I go, great guy.
Mm-hmm.
Loves Pink Floyd, loves playing the guitar, plays the guitar and sings in his church band. Happens to know the church is right down the street from my house. Freaking guy looks at me and he goes, Larry, how the heck did you find out all that stuff?
Yeah. No, yeah. It's being curious.
With him because I was curious.
Yeah.
Relationship with the dude. I found out 3 or 4 things about that guy in the span of 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Leader, you have the capability of doing this. You got to bring intentionality to the forefront. Get to know your people. Watch what starts to happen to your culture.
Yeah. Are you optimistic that people can take this on, that people can get more curious and get to know their people and start to desuckify work a bit?
I mean, it just, of course. I mean, if I'm of course they can. It's the will do and the can do.
Yeah. No, I think I'd say I'm reasonably optimistic. I'm certainly hopeful. But I think part of it comes from, just having these conversations and putting them in front of people and giving people it kind of gives them permission to be like, oh, okay. Yeah, maybe I will show up with a little more curiosity next time I'm talking to one of my team members or talking to the guy who shows up to inspect the plumbing and the electric, and kind of make that a consistent habit of just showing up with a little curiosity. Speaking of curiosity, I'm curious if you're open to do a little desuckified sound effect here for the show. As you've probably known, I sprinkle in some sound effects and
it'll come out of my mouth. But
yeah. I'm game. Let's see it. What do you got?
It's not going to be an animal sound. So
That's
sorry.
right.
It's not going to be an animal.
We're equal opportunity here. Anything that comes out is good.
This is the first thing that comes to mind based on what we've been speaking about the last 5 minutes.
Okay.
And it's good old. So now I'm dating myself. I grew up watching Charlie Brown. TJ, you're going to understand where I'm going with this in 2 seconds. Wah, 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 wah. Right? You know exactly where I'm going with this.
I do. I love that.
Wah, 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 wah. Now, a leader, if you're just, this is just the mouth talking without the heart, right?
Yeah.
You're just paying lip service to all the people in your company. Don't be surprised if behind your back they're going wah, 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 wah.
Guaranteed. Yeah. I mean, it's that little sound like, meow, 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 meow. Yeah, whatever. Yeah. I love that sound. It was one of the, as you can see, I'm a huge Charlie Brown, Peanuts, Snoopy guy. I've got some Snoopy stuff in the background there. You're speaking my language with that sound. So I love it, Larry. Last thing I obviously want to ask, obviously we know Selling from the Heart is the book. I believe that's your website too.
Yeah.
Is it sellingfromtheheart.com?
No, it's actually, if anyone wants to find out what we're up to and all that, they can just go to sellingfromtheheart.net. I wish it was.
I'm a .net too. Okay.
Somebody has .com.
Yeah.
And, more power to them, but they can go to sellingfromtheheart.net. They want to learn anything they want about Selling from the Heart. One last thing, if you allow me to.
Yeah.
If anyone wants a free signed copy of Selling from the Heart, all I ask is go to sellingfromtheheart.net/book. Just pay for shipping and handling. I'll sign a copy and I'll get it out to you. It would be my pleasure.
No, I like that. And people should, probably follow you on LinkedIn too.
I'm all over LinkedIn.
Always good, right? Yeah. Check out the podcast, the Selling from the Heart podcast as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, I always appreciate a fellow .net person. I know the frustration of the .com not being available.
But nevertheless.
Well, I think it's worthwhile for people. There's lots of good stuff on your site. Your book is great. Podcast is fun. You're building this community along with your movement. I mean, it's all the good stuff that I think leads to the good outcomes. You're bringing all of those pieces together. And I think it's a pretty good model for anyone who's wanting to make a difference, to come back to that term one more time.
Well, no, I appreciate it. I'm super grateful to get to know you. Thank you to Dan Dominguez for
Absolutely. Yes, Dan. Thank you.
I had a great time. So thank you so much for entrusting me with your audience.
Yeah, of course. Well, we'll talk to you soon, Larry, and thanks for coming on the show.
That's my pleasure.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in to the DesuckifyWork Podcast. And thanks to Larry for bringing energy and authenticity to the show. You can follow Larry on LinkedIn and check out his site, sellingfromtheheart.net. And please read his book, also called Selling from the Heart. It will change how you feel about sales and how you act as a result. Speaking of feelings, I feel like you should take a look at my site and my Substack newsletter. They may change how you feel about coaching and quite possibly inspire you to set up a free 30-minute What the Heck is Coaching All About call with yours truly. I truly hope you enjoyed this episode. Bye, everyone.